Now, today, obviously, we've got our hands full. Why? Because we've got a massive matchup with the reigning champion Ohio State Buckeyes as they welcome in the number one team in the country, the Texas Longhorns. We'll be giving you a tale of the tape, the storylines, the matchups, and of course, some game picks, plus taking a look at UCLA hosting Utah, the Nebraska-Cincinnati matchup in Arrowhead. And before we get out of here, we will give you a player to watch for the weekend in the Big Ten. Before we get into tale of the tape, DK, Bud, Danny, first, what is it like to go into a college football season, a week one, and to have a matchup of this magnitude, Ohio State hosting Texas?
I love it. I do think it's one of the things that really helps these coaches in training camp to get their team pretty fine-tuned and focused on a huge game. Like sometimes when you have an easier opponent, they might have a tendency to look ahead, and you hear the coaches say that sometimes we can't overlook our first opponent. You don't have to worry about that at all with either one of these teams overlooking the opponent. This has been circled all season long as a significant matchup, and it also allows you to game plan a little bit more specifically, have a little bit more of an enhanced game plan with a little extra time to prepare for them, throw some new wrinkles at them. So I cannot wait for this matchup, just like all of college football fans across the country, and I think it's going to be an all-time banger.
Totally agree with DK. I mean, both teams have to come out here. They have to throw their fastball. You really can't hold anything back. A lot of teams we see kind of load manage early in the year. They play all these, lesser level teams. This is big boy ball on day one. All these players know each other. Ohio State recruits against Texas quite frequently. They're all at the same elite camps. They've all kind of grown up, being on the camp circuit and the 7-on-7 circuit. So, what a fun game. A bunch of elite athletes. I'm ready to watch this.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because we discussed that with in-state rivalries, right? The guys that went to high school together, it's always familiar. But the very few that are in that upper tier of recruiting, yeah, they all know each other too. They've all been on the visits. They've all been through the camps, as you mentioned. Another cool angle that we have right here. Okay, on to tale of the tape. We have gone through and we have identified 6 different categories that we are going to be comparing when it comes to Ohio State and Texas: the quarterbacks, the running backs, the wide receivers, the offensive line, the defense, and the coaching. And thanks to our stellar team behind the scenes, we're going to be able to update this in real time. So let's have the debate. I'll let our resident quarterback weigh in second here. Bud, as you look at Arch Manning on one side, Julian Sayin on the other, Manning clearly with a lot more experience, though not much more in competitive action. Who do you think has the edge when it comes to Texas and Ohio State at the quarterback position?
Sure, Chip. So based on the recruiting profiles, it's hard to go wrong here picking either guy. I'm going to pick Arch Manning because I think he has a lot more athleticism than Julian Sayin does. And in an early season matchup, they both have great pedigrees, totally agree. But look, early season matchup, what did we see in Ireland with Kansas State, Iowa State? You see protection breakdown. You see guys having to scramble around, make plays with their legs. I think it's Arch Manning here because of his legs, because of a little bit more experience in some real games. Sayin might be a stud. We have seen some flashes from Arch that makes me want to go with Arch.
Yeah, I think some people could even accuse, well, you're just going with Arch Manning. He's the bigger name, but we have at least seen him play, right? I mean, that's at least we've seen him out there, and sometimes been good and other times it wasn't. Remember, he did come in against Georgia at home, didn't look great. Neither quarterback looked great for Texas that game, but at least he's been in that environment, and we know he's able to go out there and operate in some hostile circumstances. Also had some snaps in other key games across last season, something we haven't seen from Julian Sayin. I do think, if you pair it with some of the other pieces around there, I think maybe it gets tighter, but I think it's Arch Manning. Also compared when Julian Sayin having a new coordinator, potentially Brian Hartline calling the plays with Ryan Day. Arch's familiarity with Sark's system, I think, puts him over the edge. So I'll go with Arch as well.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before, but Arch Manning has been a member of the Texas football program for 30 months. He has been working with Steve Sarkisian for 2.5 years. He should have the edge here. No pushback from me on this one. Now we get to a little bit of an interesting discussion because on the Texas side at the running back position, we've got some players that we have seen at times, but they haven't all been healthy together. Your CJ Baxter, Contravius Wisner. Then on the Ohio State side, you're replacing Quinshon Judkins. You're replacing Travion Henderson, two huge pieces to that national title run. When we're trying to give an edge at the running back position, how would you look at that, DK, and how would you break that down?
I'd give the slight edge to Texas in this one as well. You mentioned the losses that they had at Ohio State. It is such a big void when you lost, the two all-star running backs last year in Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. CJ Baxter's another player back to being full health. Like, he was pretty special when he was healthy. I think he's really going to bump up that one. And you mentioned Trey Wisner, who's another one. I think we at least know what he can give us, and he's been out there as a pretty consistent performer for the Texas Longhorns. So I'll go with the running back edge to the Texas Longhorns.
I think I'm going to agree with Danny here ever so slightly. None of these rooms stand out as being special relative to the talent overall on both of these rosters. I think Texas probably has some more upside, especially if Baxter is a guy who's back to full health. Give me the Longhorns here ever so slightly, but I'm not really sure running backs make the difference in this game.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. Let's make it a clean sweep. We'll go Texas at quarterback. We got Texas at running back. Now, Bud, before we go to offensive line, I think that we've got, so we're keeping an eye on some injury status, some availabilities, a lot of questions surrounding this game, obviously, which will be decided at the lines of scrimmage. I got thoughts about Ohio State as well, but I don't want to step on your toes. As you're looking at the offensive line in particular, what stands out in terms of being really important in this matchup?
Well, Chip, I think you mentioned it. It's health, right? We've already see that Texas lost Andre Kojo, who was in contention to be their starting right tackle this year. Now Trevor Goosby has been battling an injury. Now, Steve Sarkisian, the Texas head coach, did say he expects him to play. He also said something extremely similar last year about their starting left tackle, Kelvin Banks, who did not end up playing against Georgia there in the SEC title game. So do we take Sark at his word? I personally don't trust any of these coaches when it comes to injury reports. Now, when the official one comes out, which I don't know if we'll have because it's a non-conference game, so a lot of schools don't release them for non-conference games. They keep it to conference games only. But if he doesn't play, that's a major red flag here for Texas because teams don't have four good tackles. They're already down Kojo. I think Baker and Goosby could be an excellent combo if Goosby's healthy. But if for some reason he's limited or doesn't play, then I think it's all hands on deck for the Longhorns. Ohio State, pretty talented, maybe not amazingly talented. They do return, some important guys there. They went out and added a tackle in the transfer portal from Rice. But I think this is, if healthy, advantage Texas. But to me, it's kind of a push if not. That's not really helping Mikey make this chart, though.
DK, what you got?
I think this one's probably the toughest one. I think it's probably the closest to a draw that I could come across. They both have significant pieces across the board. I'll give it ever so slightly to Ohio State, a little bit more experience, and the fact that they're playing at home. That's where I go with the edge because I do think it's pretty even. They both have a lot of talent across the offensive lines, but the ability to have the crowd noise not as loud when you're operating on the offensive side of the ball, I'll give it to Ohio State.
Great point. And I'll just go ahead and push this all the way over. I was ready to say Ohio State. And it's funny because it ties back to looking at Arch Manning and giving him the advantage because of his mobility. I think he will need that mobility because of what they could be facing along the Texas offensive line. Some of the camp buzz that we have heard from Ohio State is that after a season where Ryan Day felt like he had to mix and match all the different pieces and they were constantly trying to battle injuries and find the right five, they feel like they are healthier and deeper along the offensive line than they have been in quite some time. Like Bud mentioned, you're not rolling out a lot of names that are getting on the preseason All-America hype, but as a unit, I think that the Joe Moore Award and similar type honors could be coming for this Ohio State group. I like this Ohio State group. I think it is a strength of the offense. So while quarterback and running back we are giving to Texas, I am going to take the offensive line. And in it sort of, as we're looking at a draw, I'll go ahead and push that all the way over to the Ohio State side. Okay, DK, wide receiver. This one's tough, right? This one's really tough. What are we going to do?
No, but I actually think it's closer. I mean, I'm going to give it to Ohio State because they have Jeremiah Smith, but I will be, reminding people that in the playoff game last year, Jeremiah Smith was held in check pretty well by the Texas Longhorns defense, but he is a freak, and he does have Carnell Tate alongside him as well, and it has become wide receiver U with our now play caller, Brian Hartline, doing a phenomenal job there as well. So you throw in Brandon Innes and a tight end who's really good as well. I do think Ohio State gets the edge, but I do think it's closer than people think. Remember, Ryan Wingo is a speedster on the outside. DeAndre Moore is pretty good. They've got a slew of young players. So I think it's closer than people may think, but I absolutely have to go with Ohio State because of that guy right there on your screen, who is about maybe the most dominant player in college football.
Are we counting tight ends here as well?
Ooh, you can do Max Clare for Ohio State as a way to sort of like even or take it over the top potentially.
I think if we count tight ends, this is a big advantage for Ohio State. I think Carnell Tate, who is pretty clearly the 2 for the Buckeyes, would be Texas' number 1, maybe with a bullet. I think Max Clare was the best tight end in the transfer portal. Reading bucknuts.com, feel like they do a great job for us on 24/7 Sports Network. Feel like the word out of camp has been extremely positive about all these receivers, and especially the feedback on Clare has been fantastic. Not too many times we're going to say Texas doesn't have the receiver advantage this year if we do this, but Ohio State here to me is a pretty clear advantage at the spot.
I agree. I mean, I'm going to give this to Ohio State as well. And if we want to count the tight ends as a pass catchers category, Bud, how about the loss of Gunnar Helm? Because between Matthew Golden and Gunnar Helm, you're losing a lot from the pass catching group from last year. Isaiah Bond's gone. And yeah, I agree with you, Danny. Ryan Wingo, DeAndre Moore are 2 fantastic young talents, but still we're talking about a world when it comes to Jeremiah Smith. All right, what about the defensive side of the ball? I'm sure Tom Fornelli's yelling at us somewhere that we're trying to group all of defense into just one category. But Bud, which way would you go for the defense in terms of trying to give an edge?
Well, I think both teams have really experienced secondaries, but I'm going to go with Texas here. I think Texas has many more impact defensive linemen than Ohio State does. Colin Simmons off the edge is absolutely nasty. I think Texas linebackers are super freaky athletic. I'm going to go advantage Texas here. I think their defense is not by a lot, but somewhat discernibly better than the Buckeyes.
I'm in agreement with Bud. I'll go with Texas as well. Colin Simmons had such a breakout season last year as a freshman. You got Michael Taft in the secondary coming back, and Caleb Downs is no slouch in the secondary, maybe one of the best secondary players in the country. But as a group, I think you've got to give the edge to Texas. The defensive line that Bud mentioned, not only Colin Simmons, but also in the middle, getting a couple portal guys to help shore up the interior of that one. Really solid linebacker play as well. I think both of these defenses are really good, but I think you've got to give the edge to Texas.
Yeah, clean sweep, more freaks that I know. You mentioned Anthony Hill, Colin Simmons, just guys that are going to be that have always been jumping off the screen and making plays. So yeah, I'm going to say edge Texas on the defensive side. Now comes the fun one. If you're watching on CBS Sports Network, you see that the last one is coaching. One of these coaches has a national championship ring. One of these coaches has an absolutely bananas win-loss record. And yet, I still think this is a little bit of a debate. Now, for the purposes of our discussion, I will say that I approach this as not just head coach, but coaching staff. So that might tip where I'm leaning, but DK, you get first word.
Man, this one's tough. And there's a lot of question marks with Ohio State having to replace both coordinators. I'm going to go with Ohio State. Again, some of this comes back to having been there and done that. And I think Ryan Day probably was one of the most disrespected coaches for the last few years, even by his own fan base, who was ready to fire him after that 4th loss to Michigan. But he's shown the ability to overcome, coordinator changes before. I know they lose their defensive coordinator who goes off to Penn State. I think Matt Patricia is a pretty qualified candidate to replace them. We've seen, more coaches coming from the NFL, coming to the college ranks and having success. Brian Hartline is new, but I also think that could be more Ryan Day on the offensive side of the ball, where last year it was kind of Chip Kelly's offense. This year, I think it's much more collaborative, and Brian Hartline is familiar with the system. He's been there. So I'm going to give the slight edge in totality to Ohio State.
I'm going to go with Texas slightly, but again, I don't think this is like a slam dunk in either direction. If you sat him down, it's like, all right, none of these guys suck. They're all really, really good coaches. If you told me it was Day and not Hartline, I think I might go Ohio State. So like Danny, you may be right on that, but like to me, there's a reason Hartline was passed over for the job in the past, right? And that's because like inexperience, hasn't been a play caller at this level before. Sark's an excellent play caller. I think staff continuity is going to push this to Texas as well. Like, same offensive line coach, right? Like really same entire staff. So Sark has had some of the lowest turnover rates on his staff in the country. So I'm going to go edge Texas here in coaching.
Yeah, we've been dealing with almost a half decade of the Texas coaching brain trust staying together. I think that matters in a matchup like this. Week 1, I'll be the tiebreaker here. I'm going to push this over to a coaching edge for the Texas Longhorns for our tale of the tape here on the Cover 3 podcast. Now, we'll be doing the expert picks in a little bit, but just to review the tale of the tape, we are saying Texas edge quarterback, Texas edge running back, Ohio State edge offensive line, Ohio State edge wide receiver, Texas edge defense, and coaching edge Texas as well. Now, does that mean that we are picking Texas to win? Not necessarily, but coming up on the other side, we turn our attention to the matchups to watch, expert picks, game predictions, and more. Next. Here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, continuing our look at the Spotlight Top 5 game between Texas and Ohio State in Columbus on Saturday. We gave you our tale of the tape. Now let's go inside the matchup, big game breakdown style. But as you look at the way these two teams are lining up, and we've already discussed some of the ways the different sides compare against each other, but I don't know if you know this about football, but the running backs don't play the running backs and the wide receivers don't play the wide receivers. So as they line up on the field, how do you see the big matchup pivot points between the Buckeyes and the Longhorns?
Again, does Texas have a plan to stop Jeremiah Smith? They kind of stopped him there in the Cotton Bowl that we were at, but ultimately Ohio State still found a way to score, screen passes, throwing the balls to other receivers. I believe Kanell Tate was the leading receiver in that ball game. I just have a hard time getting away from the fact that like Ohio State literally has a guy who would be a top 10 receiver in the NFL playing college football, and they have him for 2 more years. And like I don't want to be reductive and boil it down to just one guy, but I just think you have to give him so much attention, and they have multiple other NFL picks at receiver. So yes, Texas had more edges in the matchup edges, but I think the size of this edge might be enough to get it done for Ohio State. So to me, how does Texas match up with Jeremiah Smith and the other stud receivers like Kanell Tate and Max Clare at tight end that the Buckeyes possess?
Yeah, that to me is a huge storyline. And they did stop him, as you mentioned, with 1 catch for 3 yards in that playoff game, but everybody else was able to go off. Like, that's what happens. And this is what can be the great advantage of having Jeremiah Smith. Sure, he might have a quiet day, but what does it take to keep him quiet? It takes dedicated multiple defenders, a safety shaded over the top, a bracket coverage, anywhere he is on the field, kind of always being a distractor. And guess what that takes away from? Your ability to stop everybody else, including the run game. So I do think he is that dynamic playmaker. And I know they have Jack Sawyer and others on the defensive side of the ball, but they do have Caleb Downs, who's one of the more dominant secondary players. Look at the impact plays that he's made in these big games for them too. So I also think that the storyline, as far as like what's in play here, home field. I mean, the line tells you this is essentially a pick'em game, but there is an advantage to playing in your backyard. Now, how much is it worth? Are they going to cover the spread? I don't know, but I do think that's why I'm leaning towards the Buckeyes in this one. That home crowd should be wild. It should be crazy. With younger quarterbacks, it's harder to operate at the line of scrimmage. With younger offensive linemen that haven't played as much, it's more challenging to communicate, to hear your quarterback make the calls. So I think that's a huge part of this storyline as well.
We spent a lot of time last year. Once we got deeper into the season, we acknowledged that Texas was a good team, right? But then we started to really hold their resume, under the microscope. We were like, who have they beaten, right? It was a little bit of a debate. We knew they were good. All the data told us that. But now I'm thinking back and I'm like, all right, Steve Sarkisian, what are his best wins as Texas's head coach? You've seen a lot of impressive performances, maybe in defeat, right? You think about Washington. You think about maybe the defeat to the Ohio State last year when they were marching, trying to tie the game before Jack Sawyer runs it back the other way for a touchdown. But then I remembered a couple of events. Number one, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, taking Texas into the big house, kind of outclassing them early and being able to put the game away. Number 2, going into Tuscaloosa and being able to walk out with the win. Can this Texas team be road warriors like they have been in the past? Is there something to that coaching continuity that we've talked about where they've had the same group together, that they know what buttons to push and the ways to get them mentally ready? Because these are 2 phenomenally talented teams, rightly rated as national championship contenders. It's an X factor for me without a doubt, but an X factor that says, if Texas has done this, gone into somebody else's house and been able to come out with a win, are they going to be able to do it again against the Buckeyes? I would definitely take Ohio State over the Michigan team they beat. Maybe a little bit of a wash with the Alabama team that they took down, but still something that is in that track record for Steve Sarkisian and this staff, where I'm thinking, it's not nothing, right? It's not nothing.
What was the constant in those 2 road wins? Quinn Ewers balled out in both of them. Yeah, he played great. And I hear way too many people, and Arch Manning long-term, like potential-wise, clearly has more upside than Quinn Ewers. But that's the one thing we don't know yet, is how he's going to play. And you got exceptional play. I remember watching the game against Michigan thinking, man, this guy looks like a first-round pick. He had some spectacular plays on the run, moving around a little bit. Bama, 3 touchdown passes, including a beautiful, bloop rainbow throw down there, touchdown to close it out. I think that's the one unknown for me, and that's what they've gotten from Quinn Ewers, and we don't know yet if we're going to get that from Arch Manning.
All right, now let's put it to it. Before we get out of here, we got to give them a pick, right? I mean, naturally, for our locks, you can come catch those on Thursday at youtube.com/cover3 or wherever you get your podcast. But just as a general thought, who you think's going to win, who you got, DK, I'll let you go first.
I might have already given it away. I'm going Ohio State as the defending national champion, and I do think home field matters so much. The one, unknown is Julian Sayin, and it could be bumpy. It's been bumpy in the past for some of their younger quarterbacks early out of the gate, but I do feel like having the most difference, the biggest difference maker on the field, Jeremiah Smith. Potentially, I think Colin Simmons might have a say about, the defense, who's the biggest difference maker, but Ohio State does have Caleb Downs too. I'm going to lean towards Ohio State. I'm going to pick them.
I'm going to go Ohio State as well because of Jeremiah. There's certainly a possibility that Arch just balls out and plays at a level that Sand can't get to. And, maybe that Texas edge rushers just give Ohio State problems all day. But I'm going to make Texas stop Jeremiah again. I'm going Ohio State because of the receivers and the pass catchers.
I'm going the other way, gentlemen. I cannot get out of my head DeAndre Moore, the Texas wide receiver, and I've mentioned this on the podcast. They asked him at the beginning of fall camp what the difference in quarterback was, and his quote was something along the lines of, it's like going from baby wheels to super wheels. And so I think Super Wheels ends up being the star of the day. Give me Arch Manning balling out and Texas pulling off the big upset.